Usually the Clackamas River Trail and the Bagby Hot Springs Trail. As I worked alone but had a powerful two-way radio on my belt, in the 7 years, I never had a sighting, but had many times of something following me or paralleling me. I've often heard faint human voices coming from atop steep cliffs, and strange whistles, plus some single tree knocks in the distance. One summer day, I was working near the Little Zigzag Falls trailhead, and although no cars were parked and no hikers on the short trail to the waterfall, something was throwing small rocks at me. Actually not at, but near, as to warn me that I was impeding on their habitat. Early in 2016, I was doing trailhead cleanup near the Hillock Burns area outside of Estacada, and I was the only one up there. I was there maybe half the day picking up garbage, target shooting trash, and bullet casings when the forest got eerily quiet, and it was a strong, wet animal smell, just like a sweaty, wet horse would smell in the air. It scared the crap out of me, but nothing happened. Then the odor wasn't the typical sulfur and dead animal odor. The house I grew up in was almost 100 years old when I was born, and the third floor always had a bad feeling to it. Everyone in my family has seen or experienced something on the third floor of that house. For the most part, it was harmless, just creepy. When I was 12, I had a terrifying experience, though. I was in my room on the third floor doing homework. I was sitting there working when I suddenly felt cold, had this overwhelming feeling of dread suddenly out of nowhere. Felt like something was behind me, but I was too scared to look. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do. Then my fight or flight instinct took over. I kicked the chair from under me and ran down the hill to the stairs. I stopped and looked back towards my room and saw a dark, floating mass in the doorway, slowly coming down the hall towards me. I felt safe once I was on the second floor, where my family was watching TV. I never told them what happened until a few years ago. We moved out of that house in 1990 when I was 14. I dream about that house from time to time, and there's always horrible, scary nightmares. One of my family members told me he had a similar experience on the third floor when I was little. I really think there was something not right about that place. My whole family had experiences seeing apparitions over the years at our house. Tall guy, pea coat-like jacket, one of those typical NYC-type business people hats, standing against the doorway. Other times you see a shadow run across the basement. Another time, I was in the basement. My brother asked if I was in my room upstairs. I wasn't, because there was someone sitting on my bed. Doors would close, lights would turn on and off. It never bothered us much, but we named him Edward the Ghost. This was a new construction house, so there was no previous history other than being an empty field. I worked at a nursing home in Ames, Iowa. Another CNA, an extremely experienced aide who had been in a role for like 30 years, and I were doing overnight rounds. We opened the door to a resident's room and saw white dress shoes and white pants that faded into nothing as you looked up. The aide shrieked and ran. I just closed the door. I eventually coaxed her back into finishing the rounds, but after that shift, she never came back. 30 years, she just walked away. I have lots of other stories from the job. I don't want to say what ghosts are, but I think they're real. On the day my father died, at around the time he was thought to have taken his own life, I was sitting on the couch, and a dark shadow shaped like a person walked past me, hung around for a second, and then vanished. I had an odd feeling a little bit before this happened. I was laying down and sat up because I felt odd. The next day, I got a phone call from my sister saying he had died the previous afternoon. I'm sure he still visits me from time to time. I bought the house he owned when he died. Whenever I'd be in the workshop, I'd be sometimes overcome with grief. Turns out, that's where he hung himself. I was never told exactly where it happened until the poor fellow that found him told me. So that all makes me believe in the paranormal just a little bit more. When my neighbor's mother died, I swear I could smell her perfume and cigarette smoke in my house. She lived here as a child. I was a young teenager when I saw a ghost, demon, whatever you want to call it. I had woken up to the sound of something moving in my bathroom across the hall, but the lights were all off, so I thought it was strange that someone was in there in total darkness. Then when the sound stopped, I looked over to my doorway to see who it was. There was a 7 or 8 foot tall being crouched under my doorway coming into my room. It stopped when I looked at it and snapped his head up to look right at me. It was a hazy blue, purple color and had no facial features, just 2 red dots for eyes. And when those eyes met mine, I immediately felt the most horrific, depressing, dreadful feeling at the core of my body I've ever felt. I wanted to die in that moment. Then, after staring at me for probably 2 to 4 seconds, it felt like an eternity, it backed out of the room and ran down the hall, past my parents' room without making a sound. I immediately felt sick to my stomach and ended up puking from fear. Parents checked the house and found no sign of anyone there. To this day, I still have no idea what it was. I've never experienced anything like it again. I once saw an apparition of a man in a red shirt walking in my closed backyard, but only for an instant. I just shook my head without saying a word, and my 3-year-old, who was sitting beside me, asked, "Who was that man in the red shirt?" So no, I'm not superstitious enough to believe in ghosts, except for that one. That was real. I mean, when I lived with my folks in the basement, we'd have some pretty funky stuff happen from time to time. My CD player would just turn on and start playing and spinning a CD, even though it was unplugged and the battery area was empty. The TV would change channel or volume, and stuff would move around at random. Never when you were looking at it, though. We'd leave my room to play, join a kid's room, go back, and grab something, and my toys were rearranged slightly. But the one that got me, after a stupid ghost tour in Victoria, British Columbia, went to what was a brothel back in the gold rush days at one point. They tore up the floors to renovate, and they found the remains of like 10 women. Felt weird. All the way to the hotel, went to bed, and woke up at like 4 in the morning. For some reason, started thinking about the nasty bouncer they've been telling us about. And for some reason, started thinking, oh, but he didn't mean to hurt those girls. He must just be really misunderstood. He's not a bad guy. Then after a wait a minute, WTF moment, opened my eyes, and there's this dark shadowy shape, like 6 foot tall, wearing a bowler hat, just staring at me. I locked my eyes on the bastard for a solid 10 minutes, just frozen. The light in the room was increasing, because it was late summer and dawn was on its way, and the shape never lost its definition, nor did it move. And I bolted, shook my partner awake, and the second I looked away, he vanished. Could it have been sleep paralysis? Sure. I never experienced it before or in the 12 years since, though. I was the night owl in my family growing up. My parents and siblings went to bed early, and I just enjoyed the sweet, sweet early 2000s internet in peace. One night, I was in my room late at night and saw my mom walk past the door. I got up to ask what she was doing, and when I looked down the hall where she'd walked, all the lights were still off. I looked to my left, where my parents' room was, and could see her sound asleep in her bed. I'd had weird things happen before, but this was the first time I clearly saw something that could not have been there. I'm from the United Kingdom originally. My grand's house was over 200 years old. It was haunted by a Victorian lady in a mourning dress. My gran saw her several times, as did my sister. I saw her in a mirror as black mist as a kid. My granddad's spirit was also in the house. You knew he was there because you could smell his tobacco smoke. Worst things in the house was how the Victorian woman made you feel. After midnight, downstairs in the house was terrible. The atmosphere was thick as a treacle. I lived in the house alone after my gran died, and I hated being downstairs late at night. Then some nights, I'd hear someone running up the stairs when I was in bed, or I'd wake in the winter to find all the windows in the house open. Every house I lived in, something happened to me. I went to a medium. She said I'm very close to spirits and they are attracted to me. I don't know if that. I've seen a few ghosts over the years. There was a lot of different things, but I think the creepiest was walking down a hallway and avoiding a small vacuum cleaner my mom had left out to the side. So as I walked past, I moved my leg out of the way. Then I realized our vacuum cleaner was bigger and looked different. So I looked back and it was gone. Nothing was there. So WTF had I avoided standing waist height. There'd be knocks that replied to stuff, clothing being thrown about, weird apparitions. I think I was going crazy, but my mom experienced them too, and they all stopped as soon as we moved. When I was younger, I used to sleep with my door open because I was scared of the dark. Outside my door was a hallway, and in the middle was a bathroom. The other side was my sister's room. I decided to keep the bathroom light on since I was scared of the dark. And I was about to fall asleep. I decided to look up into the hall. What I saw still burned into my head today. It was a shadowy black figure in my doorway, sitting there, not moving one bit, even when I made eye contact with it. Then I blinked, and he was gone. Throughout the years of living in the house, I've had lots of small incidents, like hearing footsteps or sounds of sweeping, as well as doors slamming, but nothing of that caliber ever happened again. Ours is benevolent. I strongly believe that he is my 12-year-old guardian angel. My son was born at 28 weeks, and ever since we brought him home, it's as if this spirit was growing up with him. I'm not sure if you believe in mediums, but this is what she told me was happening. We could hear him crying in the other room when we had our baby in our room. I saw him running into the closet when they were about 3 years old. I thought it was my son, but my son was fast asleep on the couch, wearing a black t-shirt. The child that ran to my closet was wearing an orange shirt. I saw him recently walk into our pantry. He was wearing shorts that were similar to what my now 12-year-old son wears. Basketball shorts, tees, and tennis shoes. We have a walk-in pantry and I saw his legs, shorts, and sneakers. My husband was sitting at the bar and looked at me. He said I looked like I just saw a ghost. I told him I think I did, and he brushed me off. About an hour later, he told me, I've seen him too. In my parents' house, 2 areas make me feel odd. One of them is a hallway, which was once a room where wheat was being punched out. Wherever I walk over there, my mind always tells me to run for your life. I always feel like someone's watching me over there. The other room is the piano room. I always get chills when I'm standing in the kitchen and looking into that room. It feels like someone's just standing there. I was talking about paranormal experiences with my friend. She lives in a haunted house. And asked if she ever felt weird while being in those 2 areas of the house. She said the same thing I had written above. Never had a negative experience, and we live in an Italian farmhouse that was built in 1502. We certainly have ghosts all over the property. Literally not a single person in our family is religious or believes in supernatural. However, to a T, 6 out of 6 family members happily accept that our house has ghosts. Every single one of us has run into them, mainly, collectively, most noticeably on special occasions. Christmas, Easter. We will have all 6 family members sitting, talking, drinking after midnight, and someone will come downstairs. Everyone will register it, then 30 seconds later look at each other and go, someone just walked downstairs. We all saw it, but we were all right here. So, who walked downstairs? I love our ghosts. They bring fae energy. Now many of the kids have left home. We trust them to look after and guide our parents, who are up there by themselves. The house I lived in from age 8 to 18 was on a street partially built over the site where an insane asylum once stood in the early 20th century and had burned down around 1918, killing a few inmates. My house was actually one of the ones built on the actual site. Parts of the foundation could be seen in the jungle behind the house and was very haunted. We could hear pebbles hitting various windows, chairs sliding across the wooden dining room floor. We could smell perfume and hear a woman calling out our names once in a while. When my wife and I were first dating, our first sexy time session was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening and closing, followed by footsteps and what sounded like my dad calling my name. We quickly got dressed and ran out of my room only to find the house empty. On 2 different occasions, a long, 6-legged, red creature was seen scurrying across the living room and disappearing into thin air. My wife's friend once came to pick her up, and I invited her in, but she refused to get out of the car, saying there was something evil there. A friend of mine, visiting for the first time, suddenly went into a brief trance before he freaked out and went running out of the house. When we caught up to him, all he could say was, "I'm never going back in there. You've got something effing evil there." I woke up early one morning around 4 or 5 a.m., I think, and the back door was halfway open. There was no sign of a break-in. I couldn't figure out how it was even possible. The door has multiple built-in locks and a metal jamming bar. Old neighbor swore he saw people running in our backyard at night, and eventually he just moved away. People thought he had dementia or was a schizo, but then my aunt claimed she heard footsteps outside her room, which is parallel with the side and the rear of the house. My mom and her ex-boyfriend swore they saw a skeleton walking on the side of the house one night in the security cams, but that sounds like complete BS. He also swore he saw me sitting in the back of his car when I was walking home one night from the store. So I don't know about his credibility, but my mom is no liar. We've had many experiences in one house we lived in. We have since moved out. To keep this short, I only talk about the absolutely scary things. In this house, me and 2 of my sisters had bedrooms downstairs. These bedrooms were right next to the basement and is where all the activity happened. We often heard tapping on our walls, which at first we thought was the house just settling, but then it would persist until late in the evening. We would often see shadows move across the door frame to the basement, as well as things shuffling about. I remember going in the basement once to go and bring out the Christmas decorations and look down the hallway to the very back of the basement. We had this antique mirror placed at the end of the hallway. One of those massive silverback mirrors that used to go to a vanity. I looked at the mirror, and in the reflection there was a man behind me. I screamed and yeeted the F out of there as fast as I could. My sisters would be affected the worst, and they still very rarely talk about what happened to them in that house. My only story my younger sister was comfortable telling me, she heard the eyes of her doll open and shut. It was one of those dolls that had the shutting eyes when you laid it down. This doll had been placed on a shelf standing up for years, and never been moved. There was a werewolf sighting right by my work. It started at like 6 to 7 feet, then it rose as tall as the treetops, and then it disappeared in a dot in the sky. The witness is Native American. He thinks it was spiritual. It was definitely dark. Our son is 4 now. He'd be telling us about an imaginary kid named Sam he'd see at night. Sometimes we'd hear our son laughing out loud in the middle of the night, the same way as when I would be tickling him or when he enjoys a program. For a while, he'd wake up at 4 in the morning to the minute. At one point, we thought our next door neighbor visited him. He died of old age, age 93. It was a grandpa to him. When I was young, probably 8, the night my great-grandmother died, I swore I saw her in a wheelchair carting slowly up my bedroom wall. I froze. 2 days later, I heard she died. I wasn't close to her. We didn't visit that much, but she really liked me. Similarly, one night while my mom was on the phone with her sister, she hung up when she saw a procession of thin, long, shadow figures walking on the wall, appearing from one of the neighbor's wall all the way to the next. They were walking towards an old Malaysian woman next door. She was on holiday to Malaysia. Most neighbors were Malaysian. That night, she died in Malaysia. My mom described the shape of the figures as the Indonesian dolls. An ex-girlfriend freaked her mom out when she was very young when she said, "Do you remember when I was your mommy?" Her mom's mom died very young. I was talking to my 3-year-old niece for some ice cream one evening. I strapped her in the car seat in the back seat, started driving. My niece asked if Jacob, her imaginary friend, could get an ice cream too. I jokingly said, "Jacob could get his own ice cream." I laughed and said, "Just kidding. We'll get Jacob an ice cream." She didn't respond, so I looked in the rearview mirror. I couldn't see very much because it was dark. What I could see was my niece's face. She looked angry, and I was about to reassure her that I was kidding, but I realized she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at something near my ear, towards the back of my head. Then she says, "I said no, Jacob, be nice. No." She didn't mean it. My sister Ashley used to get visited at night by a dead girl with long dark hair and spider hands. Yes, this predated the ring. Yes, I'm old as F. She moved out the second she turned 18 and never looked back. 20-odd years later, our half-brother Trevor moved into her old room. It wasn't long after Trev started sleeping on the sofa, or with the lights on, told us about his new friend that he didn't like. She was a dead girl who had long dark hair, an old nightgown, and spider hands. Needless to say, none of us offered to trade rooms with him. When I was pretty young, let's say around 5 years old, my dad would occasionally wake me up in the middle of the night and hear him talking. He'd come to my room and check on me and find me sitting in the corner of my room facing the wall, in the dark, having full conversations by myself. When my dad would ask me who I was talking to, he said I would usually respond with something along the lines with, "I'm talking to the people." So this is my story when I was a kid. I had an imaginary friend named Derek who was a carbon copy of me. We were completely identical. I played with Derek for years, longer than what normal kids do. But he would always look at my mom and older sister with a sense of sadness. Eventually he went away. 23 years later, I'm digging through my mom's safe to grab some paperwork she's kept from me. I see a stillborn death certificate for a boy named Derek who shared my birthday. It was only then I found out I was actually a twin, and my twin Derek had died during birth. Creepy, right? Story from a family friend who is a single mother. Her and her young daughter, aged 3 to 4-ish, fell in some hard times and moved to a cheaper apartment downtown. Her daughter developed an imaginary friend who she claimed was a little girl who visited her through the door in the wall at night. Soon, behavioral bottoms ensured. Daughter was not sleeping, complained her friend was mean to her after she said she didn't want to play anymore and wouldn't let her sleep. Daughter started acting out, and mother became concerned once heads were ripped off Barbie dolls and eyes and mouths were blacked out with Sharpie. Last straw was when the mother found burned pieces of doll clothing and hair in the daughter's bedroom. Daughter kept blaming the imaginary friend, who was now relaying disturbing tales of how the imaginary friend wanted to play with fire and burn clothes. Her daughter stated she was afraid of the friend, who wanted the daughter to be her forever friend. Mother is scared as hell and confides in a friend and neighbor. Comes to find out the apartment they lived in was remodeled after a former fire. In a tragic accident, a family perished in the apartment fire, including a young girl approximately the age of the daughter. They noped the F out of there, and the daughter resumed her usually happy-go-lucky self. She does not remember this imaginary friend. I was hiking with my friend Jack one night at Look and Tremble. We heard a very loud knock when we were getting really deep into the brush. We took it as a warning and turned around. My son, then about 2 or 3, used to tell us about his imaginary friend Johnny, who wore all green, including a green hat. One time, we were driving by a cemetery, and my son pointed out the window and exclaimed, "That's where Johnny lives." He was very little and didn't know what a cemetery was. So we explained to him that no one lives there. It's a place for people who have died. That's when he told us Johnny was a soldier who died in a place called Nam. When my son was about 3, he would talk to someone named Wally. He was crawling one night and said Wally was looking in his window. This time his face was missing. I had him sleep in bed with my husband and I after that night, doing a perimeter check around the house. Kids are creepy little creatures. I was sleeping over one of my friend's houses as a kid growing up, and the sister was clairvoyant. She said I had a spirit that was following me. It wasn't dark though, it was a protector. Most of my extended family live around the same area, so we have lots of gatherings. For the backstory, one of my uncles, let's call him Steve, lost a childhood friend when he was 7. Steve and his friend, let's call him Jack, were having a play date one afternoon and got a bit dirty in some mud. So Steve's mother gave Jack a pair of Steve's shoes to borrow. When Jack's father came to pick him up after the play date, they forgot to put back on Jack's shoes, and Jack accidentally got in the car with the borrowed shoes still on. Tragically, the father and Jack got into a terrible car crash on the way home, which killed 7-year-old Jack. The family had him buried in the shoes he had borrowed from Steve. Not sure why. Fast forward 30 years to a family gathering in 2010. My 6-year-old cousin Sarah is playing alone with toys in a quieter room of the house. My Uncle Steve comes up to her and asks what she is playing. Sarah responds saying that she is playing with a friend, holding back a smile. Steve asks who her imaginary friend is. Sarah continues to play while saying that she is playing with his friend Jack. That he is so sorry you forgot to give your shoes back. My uncle's jaw nearly dropped. He had not talked about Jack in years, let alone tell a story to a 6-year-old. No one had brought up Jack that day, nor at any family gathering recently. Every time I remember this incident, I get chills. I was hiking at Leon Sinks near Tallahassee, and I felt like I was being followed by something. I don't know if it was a skunk ape, or maybe a fairy, or something much more mysterious. Purple Mommy. When my son was first learning to talk, he would tell us about something called Purple Mommy. It could be an imaginary friend, but these details are a bit creepy. Here's a few of the Purple Mommy details. Purple Mommy is all purple with long hair and bright, all white eyes. At the time, he mixed up purple with black, so it could have meant she was all black. Purple Mommy picks him up at night and turns off the lights. We would often find my son out of his crib in the morning, which would mean him crawling over the railing into the ground at a time where he was barely walking. Definitely found the lights in the room off a few times too, even though he's terrified of the dark. Purple Mommy needs a bandage because she has blood everywhere. Purple Mommy has no smile, meaning a mouth. Purple Mommy can take her head off. Purple Mommy really doesn't like Daddy. He told us all this stuff for maybe a year or a little more. If we ever asked where she was, he'd always point to the same spot, a corner of the room behind an open closet door. He would also wake up crying almost every night during this time. Once, during a really, really rough night, my wife went to ask him what's wrong, and his answer was, Purple Mommy won't let me sleep. When I was little, I claimed to have an imaginary friend with light brown hair and wore a nightgown. She had stars for eyes. Well, my niece was living at my old childhood home, and she told me she has a friend who misses me. And she asked why I went away. When I asked who, she described my old imaginary friend. It was super spooky. A kid said he didn't want to go to church because my invisible friend says he can't follow me in there. My youngest sister was 4 at the time, had an imaginary friend named Paris Jarris. My dad built her a small playhouse in the backyard where my mom could see her and hear her while she was in the kitchen. My sister would have tea parties and such with her imaginary friend. One day my mom heard her say, "Don't worry, as long as I'm alive, they won't hurt you." She paused and said, "Well, if you do that, then I can't help you. It's not nice to kill people." When my mom asked her, my sister said, "Sometimes I have to tell Paris to be a nice person or he can't visit anymore." We moved not too long afterwards, and she didn't get a new playhouse. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!
The flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.
Creatures over there! You have to beware! Please! Watch out! The big creature! The big creature! No! 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 The fish monster! Watch out! Please! Come back! Come back! Come back! Please! No!
Bye.